Hi, my loves. Welcome back to Una GL's story channel. I hope you enjoy the new story.
The needles slipped, and Liora swore under her breath, pressing her thumb against the bead of blood that rose on her fingertip. She was kneeling on the cold floor of the costume workshop, surrounded by a sea of pale tulle that looked like a murdered cloud, and she was losing a war against a single torn seam on the principal dancer's second act tutu. The clock above the work table read 11:47 p.m. The theater was empty, or so she had thought. Your hands remembered the choreography even when your feet refused to. The voice came from the doorway, low and precise, cutting through the silence like a blade. Leora's entire body locked. She knew that voice. She had spent 3 years trying to forget that voice, and now it was here, in the dark, watching her kneel among ruined fabric like a servant. She looked up. Seren Ashcroft stood in the doorway of the workshop, tall and silver blonde, her arms crossed over a black cashmere coat that probably cost more than Leora's monthly rent. The dim emergency lights caught the sharp angles of her face, the severe line of her jaw, the pale eyes that had once ended Leora's entire future with a single sentence. "Miss Vale," Seren said, and the name sounded like an accusation. "Director Ashcroft." Leora's voice came out steadier than she felt. She pressed her bleeding thumb against the fabric of her jeans and forced herself to stand, forgetting to favor her right leg, and the familiar spike of pain shot up her hip. She hid the wince. She had gotten very good at hiding winces. "You are working late. The costume needed repair. The gala is in 3 days. I know when the gala is." Seren stepped into the room, and the space suddenly felt smaller. She moved like she owned every inch of air she occupied, which she did. She owned this academy. She owned this theater. She had once owned Leora's dreams, and she had crushed them without a second thought. "I was just finishing," Liora said, reaching for the tutu. "You are bleeding on the fabric." Liora looked down. A small red smear marked the white tulle. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'll fix it. I know you will." Seren's eyes stayed on her for a long moment, and Liora felt the weight of that gaze like a physical pressure. "You always did have a gift for repair. You used to mend your point shoes yourself. Do you remember?" Leora's throat closed. She remembered. She remembered everything about those years, the years when she had been a prodigy, when her name had been whispered in the same breath as Seren Ashcroft's, when she had believed that hard work and talent were enough to keep the world from breaking her. "I remember," she said quietly. "Good." Seren turned toward the door. "Come to rehearsal tomorrow, 10 a.m., Studio 3. I'm a costume assistant director. I don't attend rehearsals. You do now." Seren paused at the threshold, her profile sharp against the dim light of the hallway. "The costumes need to be observed in motion. You cannot fix what you do not understand." And then she was gone, leaving Leora standing alone in the workshop with a bleeding finger and a torn. Before we continue, this story has been toned down for YouTube. Craving my fully uncensored, adult-only stories with all the passionate details? They're waiting for you on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/HunaGL. You'll find the link right at the top of the description. Tutu and a heart that had not stopped racing. Liora had not planned to return to the Ashcroft Academy of Classical Dance. She had planned to disappear into a quiet life, maybe work in a small theater somewhere far from the city, maybe never see a pair of pointe shoes again. But her sister Marin had found her the job, and Marin had made it very clear that Liora was in no position to refuse. "You need money," Marin had said, pushing the application across the kitchen table. "You need health insurance. You need to stop moping about something that happened 7 years ago." "She ended my career, Marin." "She ended your scholarship. There's a difference." She told the entire board that I was a liability. She said my body could not handle the demands of professional ballet. She said what every doctor had already told you. Marin's voice had softened just slightly. "You broke your back, Liora. You were 17. You would have destroyed yourself if you kept dancing. I would have rather destroyed myself dancing than lived like this." Marin had not answered. She had just pushed the application closer, and Liora had signed it because she was tired and broke and had nowhere else to go. That had been 3 months ago. 3 months of mending costumes, avoiding eye contact with dancers, and telling herself that she was fine, that she had made peace with her past, that Seren Ashcroft was just a woman who had made a business decision, nothing more. But now Seren was asking her to attend rehearsals, and Liora did not know what that meant. Studio 3 was bathed in pale morning light when Liora arrived the next day. She stood in the corner with her notebook, trying to look like she belonged there, watching the dancers warm up at the bar. They were young, most of them 17 or 18, with the kind of flexible spines and unbroken spirits that Liora remembered having once. Seren stood at the front of the room, her back to the mirrors, her voice cutting through the air like a metronome. Shoulders down, Elsie. Your arm is drooping. Marcus, stop rushing the plie. Again, the dancers obeyed. They always obeyed. Liora had never seen anyone defy Seren Ashcroft. Not in the studio, not in the theater, not anywhere, except once. She had defied her once. Liora pushed the memory away and focused on her notebook. She was supposed to be observing the costumes, noting how the fabric moved during grand jetés, where the seams pulled during arabesques. But her eyes kept drifting to Seren, to the way she moved through the room, correcting a wrist here, adjusting a shoulder there, her hands precise and impersonal. Miss Vale. Liora looked up. Seren was standing in front of her, close enough that Liora could smell her perfume. Something cold and floral, like winter jasmine. Yes, come here. Seren turned and walked to the center of the studio without waiting to see if Liora would follow. Liora followed. She always followed. That was the problem. Watch Nadia's arabesque, Seren said, gesturing toward the principal dancer, a tall woman with dark hair and sharp eyes, who was holding a perfect balance at the bar. Tell me what you see. Liora watched. Nadia's form was flawless, her leg extended at the perfect angle, her arms curved with practiced grace. But there was something tight in her shoulders, something forced in her neck. She's holding her breath, Liora said. Seren's eyes flickered toward her. Go on. She's so focused on the position that she's forgetting to breathe through it. It makes her look rigid. Beautiful, but rigid. And what does that do to the costume? Liora blinked. I'm sorry? The costume. When she holds her breath, her rib cage expands differently. The bodice will pull across the back. The seams will strain. You are here to observe movement, Miss Vale. So observe. Liora felt heat rise to her cheeks. She looked at Nadia again, really looked this time, and she saw it. The way the fabric pulled across her shoulder blades, the slight tension in the stitching. I see it, she said. Good. Seren turned away. You will attend every rehearsal this week. I want notes on every dancer, every costume, every adjustment. You will report to me at the end of each day. Director, I don't think. That is correct. Seren's voice was cold. You do not think, you observe. That is your job now. Liora said nothing. She just stood in the center of the studio, surrounded by dancers who were pretending not to stare, and she felt the familiar weight of humiliation settle on her shoulders like a coat she could never take off. The first week was a blur of rehearsals and notes and sleepless nights. Liora attended every session, standing in the corner with her notebook, watching the dancers move until her eyes burned. She wrote down everything. The way the tulle caught the light during pirouettes, the way the velvet bodices creased during deep lunges, the way the satin ribbons left red marks on the dancers' ankles. And every evening, she reported to Seren. Seren's office was on the top floor of the academy, a glass-walled room that overlooked the city. Liora would stand in front of her desk, reading her notes aloud, while Seren listened with her chin resting on her steepled fingers, her pale eyes unreadable. The second act tutu needs reinforcement at the hip seam, Liora said on the fourth night. Nadia's extension is wider than the original measurements accounted for. Nadia's extension has always been wide. Seren's voice was flat. The costume was designed for her predecessor, who was shorter. Then why wasn't it adjusted? Seren looked up, and Liora realized she had spoken out of turn. She braced herself for the cold correction, the dismissal, the reminder that she was just a costume assistant. But Seren just said, because no one noticed, until now. There was something in her voice, something that almost sounded like approval. Liora pushed the thought away. She could not afford to read meaning into Seren Ashcroft's words. The gala was in 2 days, and the academy was a storm of last-minute preparations. Liora had barely slept in 48 hours, her fingers raw from sewing, her eyes gritty from exhaustion. She was in the costume workshop, hemming a last-minute adjustment on Nadia's solo dress, when the door opened. You are still here. Liora looked up. Scissorin stood in the doorway, still in her rehearsal clothes, her silver blonde hair escaping from its usually perfect bun. The hem was uneven, Liora said. It is almost midnight. I noticed. Seren walked into the room, and Liora felt the familiar tension settle into her shoulders. She kept her eyes on the fabric, her hands steady, her breath even. You have been working for 12 hours, Seren said. I'm almost done. You are limping. Leora's hand stilled. She had been careful. She had been so careful. But the pain in her hip had been building all day, a dull ache that radiated down her leg, and she must have let her guard down. "I'm fine," she said. "You are not fine. You are favoring your right leg, and you have been doing it all week. It's nothing. It is not nothing." Seren's voice was sharp. "I know that injury, Miss Vale. I watched you fall. I read the medical reports. I know exactly what that pain feels like." Liora looked up, and for a moment she saw something in Seren's eyes that she had never seen before. Something that looked almost like guilt. "Why do you care?" Liora asked. The words came out before she could stop them. "You ended my career. You told me I was a liability. You made sure I would never dance again. So why do you care if my leg hurts?" Seren's expression closed like a door slamming shut. "Because you are my employee, and I do not want a lawsuit." "Is that the only reason?" "That is the only reason that matters." Liora looked back down at the dress. Her hands were shaking. "I'll finish this, and then I'll go home. There is a driver waiting outside. He will take you home." "I don't need." That was not a suggestion. Seren turned toward the door. "You will go home, you will sleep, and you will be back here at 8 a.m. The gala is in 2 days, and I need you functional." She left without waiting for an answer, and Liora sat alone in the workshop, staring at the half-hemmed dress, wondering why Seren Ashcroft had a driver waiting outside at midnight for a costume assistant she supposedly did not care about. The gala was a triumph. The dancers performed flawlessly, the costumes held together, and the audience gave a standing ovation that lasted 7 minutes. Liora watched from backstage, pressed against the wings, her heart pounding with every pirouette, every grand jeté, every perfect landing. She had not danced in 7 years, but her body still remembered. Her muscles still tensed when the music swelled. Her feet still pointed when the dancers leaped. She was a ghost at her own funeral, watching someone else live her life. After the final curtain, the cast party spilled into the lobby, a sea of champagne and congratulations. Liora stood against the wall, nursing a glass of water, trying to be invisible. "You did good work." Liora turned. Eloise Hart, the retired costume mistress, stood beside her, her silver hair pinned in a neat bun, her eyes sharp despite her age. "Thank you, Miss Hart." "Eloise." "I told you to call me Eloise." The older woman smiled. "I saw the adjustments you made to the second act tutu. Clever work. Nadia didn't have a single wardrobe malfunction. She's a good dancer. She's a competent dancer. There's a difference." Eloise took a sip of her champagne. "You were better." Leora's throat tightened. "That was a long time ago. Time doesn't erase talent. It just buries it." Eloise looked at her with knowing eyes. "Seren thinks so too. Seren thinks I'm a liability. Seren thinks you are the most gifted dancer she ever trained, and she has never forgiven herself for letting you go." Leora's heart stopped. "What?" "I have worked with Seren Ashcroft for 30 years, Eloise said quietly. "I know her better than anyone. She does not call a driver for employees she does not care about. She does not attend midnight costume fittings for assistants she plans to discard. She has been watching you, Liora. She has been watching you since the day you walked back into this building." "That doesn't make sense." "She ended my career. She ended your scholarship because the doctors told her that another performance would paralyze you. She was 28 years old. She was terrified, and she did not know how to tell you that she was trying to save your life." Liora felt the world tilt. "That's not," she never said. "Seren Ashcroft does not explain herself. She never has. She makes decisions, and she lives with the consequences. And she has been living with the consequence of losing you for 7 years." Eloise finished her champagne and set the glass on a passing tray. "Think about that." She walked away, leaving Liora standing alone in the middle of the party, surrounded by laughter and music, and the ghost of a truth she did not know how to believe. The next morning, Liora found Seren in Studio 1, alone, standing in front of the mirrors in her practice clothes. The room was empty except for the two of them, the silence heavy with everything that had not been said. "Eloise told me," Liora said. Seren did not turn around. "Told you what?" "That you ended my scholarship because the doctors said I would be paralyzed." Silence. Seren's reflection stared back at her, pale and unreadable. "Is it true?" Liora asked. "It was 7 years ago. That's not an answer." Seren turned. Her face was composed, but her hands were clenched at her sides. "What do you want me to say, Liora? That I made a mistake? That I should have told you the truth? That I have spent 7 years wondering if I did the right thing?" "Yes," Leora's voice cracked. "I want you to say something. I want you to explain why you let me believe that I was not good enough. Why you let me think that you threw me away because I was broken. Because you were 17 years old and you would not have listened. Seren's voice was raw, stripped of its usual cold control. You were the most stubborn, most talented, most reckless dancer I had ever trained. You would have danced until your spine shattered, and I could not watch that happen. So you took the choice away from me. Yes. Seren's eyes were bright, almost wet. I took the choice away from you, and I have regretted it every single day since. Liora stood in the middle of the studio, surrounded by mirrors that reflected her broken body back at her, and she did not know what to feel. Anger? Relief? Grief? Why now? She asked. Why did you bring me back? Because I never stopped watching you. Seren took a step closer. I kept your final audition recording. I have watched it every year. I have watched you dance. And I have remembered what it felt like to see someone so completely alive that the air around them seemed to burn. I can't dance anymore. I know. Seren's voice was barely a whisper. But I thought that if I could have you near me, even as a costume assistant, even if you hated me, at least I would be able to see you. At least I would know that you were safe. Leora's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. You ruined my life, I know. And now you want me to forgive you? No. Seren shook her head. I don't want your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know the truth. Liora stood there, frozen, caught between 7 years of hatred and a truth that changed everything. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to walk out of the studio and never come back. Instead, she said, "Show me the recording." Seren's office was quiet, the city lights glittering through the glass walls. She pulled a laptop from her desk drawer and opened a file. And then Liora was on the screen, 17 years old, dancing the solo that had won her the scholarship. She watched herself move, watched the way her body had flowed like water, watched the joy on her face that she had forgotten she ever possessed. She had been so young, so fearless. You were extraordinary, Seren said softly. I was 17. Age does not diminish genius. Liora watched the recording end, watched her 17-year-old self take a bow, watched the screen go black. She felt hollow, emptied of all the anger she had carried for so long. I don't know what to do with this, she said. You don't have to do anything. Seren closed the laptop. You can hate me. You can leave. You can stay. The choice is yours. You never gave me choices before. I know, and I am sorry. Liora looked at Seren, really looked at her, and she saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the weight of 7 years of guilt that she had carried alone. I don't forgive you, Liora said. Not yet, but I want to understand. Seren nodded, a single tight movement. That is more than I deserve. The weeks that followed were strange and uncertain. Liora kept working as a costume assistant, but something had shifted between her and Seren. The cold distance was still there, but now it was threaded with something else, something fragile and unnamed. Seren still called her to rehearsals, still asked for her notes, still corrected her posture when she stood too long on her injured leg. But now there were small gestures that Liora had not noticed before. A cup of tea waiting on her work table in the morning, a cushion on her chair in the workshop, a driver summoned when she worked late. You don't have to do this, Liora said one evening, when Seren appeared in the workshop with a heating pad for her hip. I know, Seren set the heating pad on the table, but I want to. Why? Seren was quiet for a moment, because I spent 7 years not taking care of you, and I want to make up for it, even if I never can. Liora looked at the heating pad, then at Seren, and she felt something crack open in her chest. You're not going to give up, are you? No. Seren's voice was soft. I am not. The trouble started with Nadia. Liora had known that Nadia resented her presence. The principal dancer had made it clear, from the beginning, that she did not appreciate a former prodigy lurking in the wings, taking notes, whispering corrections to the director. But Liora had hoped that if she stayed quiet and did her job, the tension would fade. She was wrong. It happened during a rehearsal for the winter showcase. Liora was standing in her usual corner, watching the dancers run through the second act, when Nadia stopped mid-pirouette and pointed at her. Why is she here? Nadia's voice was sharp, cutting through the music. She's not a dancer. She's not a choreographer. She's a costume assistant. Why is she watching every single rehearsal? The other dancers exchanged glances. The pianist stopped playing. Seren's voice was ice. Miss Creel, continue. No. Nadia crossed her arms. I want to know why the woman who couldn't make it as a dancer is suddenly the director's shadow. It's unprofessional. Liora felt her face burn. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor, to become invisible. Miss Creel, Seren said, her voice dangerously low, you will continue the rehearsal, or you will find yourself without a role in this production. You can't threaten me. I am not threatening. I am informing. Thea's eyes flashed. She looked at Liora, then back at Seren, and she smiled a smile that did not reach her eyes. Fine. I'll continue. But everyone here knows the truth. She's only here because you feel guilty about what happened to her. She's a charity case. Leora's breath caught. The words hit her like a physical blow. Rehearsal is over, Seren said, everyone out. The dancers filed out, casting glances over their shoulders. Nadia walked past Liora with a smirk that said everything. When the room was empty, Seren turned to Liora. She is wrong, is she? Leora's voice was barely a whisper. I am a charity case. You brought me back because you felt guilty. I brought you back because I could not bear to be in a building where you did not exist. Seren's voice was raw. I brought you back because I have been in love with you since you were 17 years old, and I have never been able to forget you. Leora's heart stopped. The world stopped. Everything stopped. What? Seren closed her eyes. I should not have said that. You can't just say something like that and then take it back. I am not taking it back. I am regretting it. Why? Liora stepped closer, her heart pounding. Why would you regret telling me that? Because I am your employer. Because there is a power imbalance that I cannot ignore. Because I have spent 7 years trying to convince myself that what I felt was just guilt and I have failed. Liora stood in front of Seren, close enough to see the slight tremor in her hands, the rapid pulse at her throat. You loved me when I was 17. I loved the dancer you were. I loved the fire in you, the way you threw yourself into every movement like it was the last thing you would ever do. I loved you. And I was terrified that if you kept dancing, you would destroy yourself. So I made the worst decision of my life, and I have paid for it every day since. Liora reached out and took Seren's hand. The touch was electric, a shock of warmth that traveled up her arm. I don't know what I feel, Liora said. I spent so long hating you that I don't know how to stop, but I don't want to hate you anymore. Seren's fingers tightened around hers. You don't have to decide anything tonight, I know. Liora looked at their joined hands, at the way Seren's thumb was tracing small circles on her skin. But I want to stop running. The next morning, Liora woke to a storm of notifications on her phone. Her sister Marin had called 7 times. Eloise had texted. There were emails from the Academy's Kongguan department. And then she saw it. Someone had leaked the footage of her injury, the fall, the scream, the way her body had crumpled on stage like a broken doll. It was online, circulating through dance forums and social media, with captions that called her a failed dancer, a has-been, a charity case trying to manipulate the director. Leora's hands were shaking as she scrolled through the comments. Strangers were debating whether she deserved her job, whether Seren was sleeping with her, whether she was faking her injury for sympathy. She wanted to disappear. Her phone rang. Seren. I know. Liora said before Seren could speak. It was Nadia. Seren's voice was tight with fury. I have proof. She accessed the archive last night. I am going to destroy her career. No, Liora, no. Leora's voice was steady. I don't want you to fight my battles for me. I want to handle this myself. How? I don't know yet, but I need to do it my way. There was a long silence, then Seren said, I will support whatever you decide. Thank you, but if you change your mind, I will ruin her. Despite everything, Liora almost smiled. I know you would. Liora found Nadia in the dressing room, packing her bag after rehearsal. The principal dancer looked up when Liora entered, and her expression flickered with something that might have been guilt. You leaked the footage, Liora said. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Liora closed the door behind her. And I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to ask you why. Nadia's jaw tightened. Because you don't belong here. You're a reminder of everything that's wrong with this academy. The director plays favorites, and the rest of us have to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. You think I have it easy? Leora's voice cracked. You think I wanted to come back here? You think I wanted to watch other people dance while I stand in the corner with a notebook? I think you're using your injury to manipulate Seren. I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm trying to survive. Nadia looked at her, and something in her expression shifted. I saw you dance before. You were incredible. I was, and now you're not. No. Leora's voice was quiet. Now I'm not. But that doesn't mean I don't deserve to exist in the same building as dancers. That doesn't mean I should be erased. Nadia was silent for a long moment. Then she said, I'm not going to apologize. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to stop, and if I don't, then I'll tell Seren to release the security footage of you accessing the archive, and you'll lose your job. Nadia's face went pale. You wouldn't. I don't want to, but I will if you force me. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Then Nadia picked up her bag and walked to the door. Stay out of my way, she said, and left. Liora stood alone in the dressing room, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She had stood up for herself. She had drawn a line. It was terrifying and liberating, and she did not know if she had done the right thing. But she had done something, and that was more than she had done in 7 years. The winter showcase was in 3 days, and the tension in the academy was unbearable. Nadia had been cold but professional. The other dancers were walking on eggshells, and Seren had been avoiding Liora since the confession in the studio. Liora understood. Seren was trying to protect her, trying to maintain boundaries, trying to undo the damage of her confession. But it hurt. It hurt to be near Seren and feel the distance between them, the words that hung unspoken in every room they shared. On the night before the showcase, Liora found herself in the empty theater, sitting in the front row, staring at the stage. The lights were dim, the seats empty, the silence absolute. She heard footsteps behind her. You should be resting, Seren's voice. Liora did not turn around. I couldn't sleep. Seren sat down beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. Neither could I. They sat in silence watching the empty stage. I meant what I said, Seren said finally. In the studio. I know I should not have said it, but I meant it. I know. I don't expect anything from you. I don't want you to feel pressured. Seren's voice faltered. I needed you to know. Liora turned to look at her. In the dim light, Seren looked younger, softer, less like the fearsome director, and more like a woman who had been carrying a secret for too long. I don't know what I feel, Liora said, but I know that I don't want to be away from you. And I know that when you said you loved me, I felt something I haven't felt in 7 years. What? Hope. Seren's breath caught. She reached out slowly, giving Liora time to pull away, and took her hand. I am terrified, Seren said. Of what? Of hurting you again, of being the reason you break. You're not going to break me. Liora squeezed her hand. I'm not 17 anymore. I know what I want. And what do you want? Liora looked at Seren, at the woman who had ended her career and saved her life, who had broken her heart and held the pieces, who had loved her in silence for 7 years. I want to stop being afraid, Liora said. I want to stop running. I want to cease where this goes. Seren's eyes were bright in the dim light. Are you sure? No. Liora smiled, a small, fragile thing, but I want to find out. Seren leaned in, and Leora's heart stopped. Their foreheads touched, their breath mingling in the space between them. I have wanted to kiss you for 7 years, Seren whispered. Then why haven't you? Because I was a coward. You're not a coward. Leora's voice was barely a breath. You're the bravest person I know. Seren closed the distance. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than an answer. Leora's eyes fluttered closed, and she felt the warmth of Seren's lips against hers, the gentle pressure of her hand on her cheek, the way the world seemed to fall away until there was nothing but this moment. When they pulled apart, Liora was trembling. Okay? Seren asked. Okay. The winter showcase was chaos. It started with a snapped tendon. The lead dancer, a young woman named Alara, collapsed during the final dress rehearsal, her face white with pain. The understudy was called in, but she was shaking, unprepared, on the verge of tears. I can't do this, the understudy whispered. I don't know the choreography well enough. Seren stood in the center of the chaos, her face calm, her voice steady. Yes, you can. You have been training for this. But the second act, the pas de deux, I've only rehearsed it twice. Liora watched from the wings, her heart pounding. She knew that choreography. She had watched it every day for weeks. She had written notes on every transition, every lift, every turn. I can help, she said. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at her. What? The understudy asked. I've watched every rehearsal. I know the choreography. I can guide you through it from backstage. Seren's eyes met hers. There was a question in them, a warning. Are you sure? Seren asked. I'm sure. The performance was a miracle. Liora stood in the wings, whispering counts, correcting angles, calling out transitions. The understudy moved with growing confidence, her body responding to Leora's voice like a dancer responding to music. And when the final note faded, when the audience rose to their feet, when the understudy took her bow with tears streaming down her face, Liora felt something she had not felt in 7 years. She felt alive. After the curtain fell, Seren found her in the wings. Her eyes were bright, her face flushed with emotion. "You saved the performance," Seren said. "I just talked. You did more than talk. You guided her. You remembered every step, every breath, every moment. You were a director tonight." Liora shook her head. "I was just a costume assistant who paid attention." "You were a dancer," Seren took her hand. "You were always a dancer, and I think it is time you stopped hiding." The next morning, Seren called a meeting of the Academy Board. Liora was not invited, but she heard about it from Eloise. "She offered you a position," Eloise said, her eyes twinkling. "Creative Director of Movement and Costume Integration. It's a new role. She created it for you." "What?" Leora's heart stopped. I don't have the qualifications." "You have more qualifications than anyone in this building. You understand dance from the inside out. You understand costume from the outside in, and you have Seren Ashcroft's complete trust." Liora sat down heavily. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes, but what if I fail? Then you fail." Eloise smiled. "And then you try again. That is what dancers do." Liora found Seren in her office, staring out at the city. She knocked softly, and Seren turned. "Eloise told me," Liora said. "I was going to tell you tonight." "Why?" "Because you deserve a place here that is not defined by your injury. Because you are brilliant, and I have been selfish keeping you in the shadows." Liora walked to the window and stood beside her. "I don't want a position because you feel guilty." "I don't feel guilty." Seren's voice was steady. "I feel proud. I watched you last night, and I saw the director you could become. I am offering you this because you earned it." Liora looked at her, at the woman who had broken her heart and put it back together, who had loved her in secret for 7 years, who was offering her a future she had never dared to imagine. "There's something I need to say," Liora said. "What?" "I need you to stop being my boss." Seren's face went pale. "What? Not permanently. But if we're going to do this, if we're going to try to be together, I need the power imbalance to be gone. I need to know that when you kiss me, it's because you want to, not because you feel responsible for me." Seren was silent for a long moment, then she said, "I have already submitted my resignation from direct supervision over your position. The board approved it this morning." Leora's breath caught. "You did?" "I was going to tell you after the offer. I wanted you to know that I am choosing you not as a director choosing an employee, but as a woman choosing another woman." Liora felt tears prick at her eyes. "You planned all of this?" "I have been planning it since the night I found you in the costume workshop." Seren reached out and cupped Leora's face in her hands. "I am done being afraid. I am done hiding. I want to be with you openly, honestly, without excuses. Even if it's complicated, especially if it's complicated." Liora leaned into her touch. "Then yes, I'll take the position." Seren smiled, a real smile, the first Liora had ever seen on her face. "Good." The empty theater had become their place. They stood on the stage, the house lights dim, the seats empty, the silence wrapping around them like a blanket. Liora could feel the familiar ache in her hip, the ghost of pain that would never fully leave. "Dance with me," Seren said. Liora laughed, a broken sound. "I can't. Not like that." Seren took her hand. "Just one step, one movement, something new. My body can't do what it used to. Then we will ask it for something new." Seren pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other holding her hand. They stood together in the center of the stage, the lights casting long shadows around them. "Close your eyes," Seren whispered. Liora closed her eyes. "Feel the floor beneath you. Feel the air around you. Feel me." Liora felt everything. The warmth of Seren's hand on her waist, the steady rhythm of her breath, the way her body swayed not with choreography, but with trust. "Now move," Seren said. They moved together, a slow, simple sway, nothing like the perfect pirouettes Liora had once performed. It was clumsy and imperfect and beautiful. "This is not a performance," Seren said. "There is no audience. There is no judgment. There is only us." Liora opened her eyes. Seren was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before, open and vulnerable and full of love. "I don't know how to do this," Liora said. "Neither do I." Seren's voice was soft. "But we can learn together." Liora leaned in and kissed her, slow and deep, under the stage lights with no audience, no performance, only choice. When they pulled apart, Seren pressed her forehead against Leora's. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you for 7 years, and I will love you for the rest of my life." Liora felt tears slide down her cheeks. "I love you too. I think I always have. I was just too afraid to admit it." "You are not afraid anymore." No, Liora smiled, a real smile, the first in 7 years. I'm not. They stood together on the empty stage, two women who had broken each other and healed each other, who had lost each other and found each other again. And for the first time in 7 years, Liora felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Because I don't make any money from YouTube, I depend entirely on paid Patreon subscriptions to keep this channel alive and continue creating content for you. I will keep posting here on YouTube, but if you want to support my work, please visit patreon.com/unagl. The link is the very first one in the description below. Before you go, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and share your thoughts on the story.